Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and welcome aboard the Eastern Express. The Caspian Sea has never been a tourist hotspot, but it has always been a trade artery. Oil, cargo, and regional transit moved across it under the assumption that whatever else was happening in Eurasia, this particular body of water was governed by a fragile but workable set of rules. Now that assumption is now collapsing. Russia and Iran are using the Caspian less like a sea lane and more like a military back hallway. Weapons moves, missiles launch, drones strike, and the countries that actually depend on the Caspian for trade are quietly preparing for the day when commercial shipping becomes a euphemism for collateral damage. Let's take a look at our latest report to find out more.
A 43-year-old cargo ship named Rona and flying the Iranian flag sank quietly off the coast of Turkmenistan on January 14th following an SOS signal and rescue operation. Turkmenistani authorities confirmed that all 14 crew members, citizens of Iran and India, were rescued from the ship. According to the ship tracking service Marine Traffic, Rona departed the Iranian port of Amirabad on January 12th and was due to reach the Russian city of Astrakhan by January 16th. However, Rona only made it halfway through its trip before sinking on January 14th. Rona regularly sailed between Iranian ports and the Russian cities of Astrakhan, Makhachkala, and Azov. The route overlaps with what Western investigative reports, including by CNN and the Wall Street Journal, have described as a key maritime channel for transporting Iranian ammunition and military supplies to Russia. Since Moscow's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, this route across the Caspian Sea has gained strategic importance as a sanctions-resistance logistics artery linking Tehran with Moscow. No official cause of the sinking has yet been made public. Whether the incident was the result of technical failure, weather conditions, navigational error, or another factor remains unclear. For now, the immediate outcome is a seemingly successful rescue operation of crew members and the sinking of the vessel itself. Yet the loss of a ship operating along one of the region's most strategically significant corridors has drawn attention beyond routine concerns over maritime safety, particularly given the broader context of military cooperation between Tehran and Moscow.
And now let's zone in on the East planning portion of our show. With Moscow viewing the Caspian Sea as a strategic passage for Iranian weapon imports, the Kremlin has a long work with Tehran to maintain naval dominance in the area. But what moves have these autocratic powers made to exert their influence in the Caspian? As always, here's a closer look.
In July 2025, Russian forces and the Iranian Navy carried out joint military exercises in the Caspian Sea. The exercise was framed as a multilateral effort to improve maritime rescue coordination and regional safety. Tehran described the drill as a so-called step towards a safe and secure Caspian Sea, claiming that its military doctrine is defensive, but the timing and context add weight beyond supposed defensive scenarios. The exercise followed heightened regional tensions, including June 2025 U.S. strikes on Iranian nuclear sites and intense confrontations between Iran and Israel. Iranian officials have since emphasized restoring air defense capabilities and strengthening strategic ties with partners, particularly Russia and China, with coordination between these countries inevitably shaping the calculations of other Caspian Sea states. This has also signaled to external actors that the Caspian Sea remains a tightly managed space. For outside observers, including NATO members, the expanding Russian-Iranian footprint may narrow room for intelligence and security activity in the region.
And now, let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. The Caspian Sea was supposed to be boring. Not literally boring. No one really expects inland seas to trend on TikTok, but geopolitically boring. The kind of place where oil moves, containers move, diplomats shake hands, and everyone pretends the rule of maritime law means something. Instead, Russia and Iran have decided to turn the Caspian into a floating military logistic hub, and now the rest of the region is waking up to the uncomfortable realization that their trade routes have been quietly repurposed into a weapons corridor. For years, Moscow treated the Caspian like a private swimming pool, just with missile launchers. The Russian Caspian flotilla fired cruise missiles at Ukraine and Syria from a body of water that, in theory, is meant to be insulated from great power conflict. Tehran, meanwhile, has used the same routes to move weapons to Russia and onwards to its proxy network. The irony is that Russia invokes legalism when it suits it and amnesia when it doesn't. See, under the 2018 Convention on Legal Status of the Caspian Sea, states are not supposed to invite external military forces into the basin. Moscow interprets that clause very creatively. Cooperation with Iran? Totally fine. Joint drills with the People's Republic of China? No problem. But if Azerbaijan is coordinating with Turkey and NATO, suddenly that's a violation of sacred Caspian scripture. The rule is simple. Foreign influence is illegal unless it is friendly to the Kremlin. This behavior naturally has its consequences. Ukraine has responded by striking Russian assets linked to Caspian operations, including bases and infrastructure connected to the Caspian flotilla. Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and Turkmenistan have accelerated naval modernization. What used to be a one-sided lake is now a crowded pond. Analysts in the region describe three emerging blocs. One axis links Russia, Iran, and People's Republic of China, coordinated through joint exercises and infrastructure work along Caspian ports and the Volga-Don Canal. A second cluster forms around Azerbaijan and Turkey, backed by the broader Turkic world and informal alignment with NATO standards and training. A third, more pragmatic alignment links Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan, balancing between economic necessity and security anxiety. These groupings are fluid, but they are solidifying into habits of cooperation. The strategic risk is not that the Caspian becomes the next full-scale war zone, but the normalization of militarization. The Caspian's value is its predictability, and it has become less safe because of the intent of the surrounding countries changed. In that sense, the Caspian is a mirror of the broader Eurasian security order. Crowded, contested, and therefore a great place to follow and look to see the geopolitical shifts go hand in hand with the shift of the disappearing coastline. And now, here to shed more light on the issue is Bruce Pannier, board member of the Caspian Policy Center. Hello and welcome to Eastern Express.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So who else better to ask about the Caspian Sea than you, Bruce? We're taking a look at today the topic about how Russia, Iran's utilizing this transit route now as for more military means. And can you first help us understand what's the transition and how the shipping lane in the Caspian Sea has evolved throughout these years?
Yes, certainly. Well, I guess I got to start with the fact that when the Soviet Union collapsed, the lion's share of the Navy, such as it existed in the Caspian Sea, went to Russia. Iran had a somewhat smaller naval presence in the Caspian Sea. But so the other three countries that emerged from the end of the Soviet Union, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and Turkmenistan, really didn't have any naval presence at all. And even to this day, it's very modest, to say the least. So there's a couple things going on here. The first is that, of course, Iran is supporting Russia in the war against Ukraine, Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And that support, it takes many aspects, but also the drones that are being shipped to Russia, other weapons, ammunition, things like that, whatever Iran can provide. A lot of that comes across the Caspian. If you look at a map, you can see that this is kind of the back door to Russia for Iran. No one's really watching it. None of the other three countries that I mentioned that came into existence after the Soviet Union fell apart are in any position to do anything about this at all. So that ended up being a kind of the sure supply route between Iran and Russia, and I suppose vice versa too. If Russia's shipping something to Iran that they don't want people to be aware of because it's under sanctions, they'll just send it across the Caspian. Now, more recently, the Middle Corridor has emerged, and this envisions a great role for the Caspian Sea, moving goods from east to west. We've been talking about Iran, Russia, which is north to south, right. But now there's the route between China and Europe is going across the Caspian Sea east to west. Clearly, Russia doesn't like this. This comes at the expense of their so-called northern corridor trade route, which is being gradually ousted in favor of the middle corridor. So, of course, Russia is not very happy about this. Iran's left out of the whole picture. They don't play really any role in this east-west trade that's evolving very rapidly. Iran and Russia really have no reason to be happy about the developments in the middle corridor at all, despite the fact that China is both their allies, and for China, this is a big deal to open up the middle corridor.
Right, but being allied doesn't necessarily mean they have the same interests, especially in this middle corridor situation. Like you mentioned, it does seem to have threatened Russia and Iran quite a lot. Now, these recent changes, how does that affect the regional trade and these routes now having a more kind of military involvement as well?
Well, one of the interesting things is they've held so many conferences and meetings about the Caspian Sea. And for 30 years, more than 30 years, they've been saying this is not going to be a bone of contention. It's going to be a sea of peace. They've made all kinds of statements, signed all kinds of documents saying that we're not going to militarize the Caspian Sea. Unfortunately, when you do start to open up these big trade routes, there has to be someone that's securing these trade routes. So of necessity, we see now that Azerbaijan is arming itself in a way which is clearly meant for maritime purposes. Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan also, but to a lesser extent. But Azerbaijan is purchasing weapons which are specifically designed to guard shipping lanes across the Caspian Sea. They spent $5 billion last year, and this is a country of 10 million people, right? So, again, Kazakhstan is a little bit behind Azerbaijan, and Turkmenistan is even behind Kazakhstan. But they're starting to realize that if they want to open up this trade route and make a lot of money, they're also going to have to guarantee the security of this trade route too. That is having the effect of militarizing the Caspian Sea. It used to be essentially a Russian lake, but that is less the case all the time.
Do you think that there will be any sort of conflict with both sides kind of ramping up the military presence in that place? Because the Caspian Sea is, like you mentioned, seen as a quite peaceful trade route. It's boring in the sense that it's kind of always there, always reliable. Do you think that there will be a point where that ceases to become the case?
I think in the case of Russia, they're pretty secure at the moment. Again, they have the largest naval presence. And I should mention, there's a caveat here, that, of course, Russian oil rigs in the Caspian Sea were hit by Ukrainian drones in the start of January. So that also shows that, admittedly, this is the closest area in the Caspian Sea to Ukraine. But that kind of flagged the fact that there is a security risk here that's going on. But it's really not so much Russia and the other countries. I think Iran, because Iranian and Azerbaijani relations are not good. And a lot of people, when they saw the weapons purchases that Azerbaijan made last year, they concluded that these weapons were clearly aimed at Iran because, again, most of them are for maritime use, coastal defense, things like that. And so they couldn't be used for against Armenia, which is the traditional enemy for Azerbaijan in that part of the world. But again, Iranian and Azerbaijani ties are not real good either. So there is a potential there for some kind of conflict. And I suppose as Iran continually is left out of all the new deals that are going across the Caspian, there's going to be a little frustration on the part of Tehran about what's going on. I should also mention just real quickly, too, that Russia, just to solidify its claim and show everybody in the Caspian who's who, in 2015, they launched cruise missiles from ships in the Caspian Sea at targets in Syria when they had troops there. So they were trying to get their enemies in Syria. That was all the military analysts pointed out there was really no reason to do that. There was much better locations to launch cruise missiles. But the thought was that this would send a message to everybody else in the Caspian that these are the kind of ships we got in the Caspian Sea. And if you're going to make trouble, those cruise missiles could easily be pointed in a different direction, maybe your direction. So, Russia's pretty safe and secure in its position in the Caspian Sea.
But as things are starting to heat up slightly, we also see Azerbaijan coordinating with Turkey and NATO as well. Do you think that would leave Russia a bit uncomfortable?
It's bound to eventually, and but we also have to remember too that when they had the northern distribution route, when the Americans and their allies were trying to supply goods and equipment to Afghanistan, and the route through Pakistan became kind of dicey. That they had a route that went across the Caspian Sea. This raised a lot of problems with certainly from Russia and from Iran both. They were like, we don't want weapons. We don't want the militaries of non-Caspian littoral states having any participation in goods that are being transited back and forth, certainly that have military value. Now, the other countries got out of that by saying these are non-lethal goods that are transiting the Caspian Sea. But this was a small example of the kind of problems that could emerge. is that, for Russia and Iran both pointed to this and said, well, this is NATO and the United States moving goods across the Caspian, and we're really not comfortable with this, and we're not sure that you're telling us, you say they're non-lethal, but who knows? So in the future, as they transit goods across the middle corridor, who's to say what kind of goods they're transiting? I mean, this is going to be one of the routes, for example, for Kazakhstan to ship uranium to Europe. So that could be problematic. You can see where Iran or Russia might object. And certainly if one of the ships has problems, sinks, something like that, this is going to be an issue. But, like I said, for now, it is still kind of the sea of peace, but that's kind of falling apart gradually. And it really is only going to take one incident to upset the whole apple cart, as they say. And all of a sudden, we're going to have a totally new situation in the Caspian Sea.
And with all these different power and players involved, do you think at some point the contesting of this region will make the cost of doing business significantly higher than it is right now?
Well, if the middle corridor works the way that they're hoping, they're trying to make this as efficient and cheap as possible. Again, let's go back to the Russian Navy. Now, if Russia figures that it's losing so much money and hates to see all the money that just in transit fees that these other Caspian countries are making, it could patrol in the middle of the Caspian Sea and start running inspections, false on the presumption that Moscow could say, we're worried about goods that are being transited back and forth, or narcotics, materials that are hazardous, something like that. And they could put their ships out there and start boarding vessels to inspect them and make sure that this isn't the case. They might know in advance that there is nothing on there, but it does start to slow down progress in bringing goods across the Caspian. The claim sounds legitimate. We're worried about what's moving across the Caspian. It's hazardous to the area. It's dangerous to people in our country, and other countries too. So we have the right to inspect these vessels and make sure that they're not bringing anything harmful from one side of the Caspian to the other. And there's no one that can really do anything about that. Because again, they have the biggest naval presence, and the Caspian's landlocked, essentially. I mean, it's surrounded. You can't move foreign ships into the Caspian at all. So Russia could throw a big wrench, into the whole works by just saying, we were safety first. We're concerned about what's moving across, and we're inspecting it. We're sorry for the delay, but we want to make sure that there's nothing nefarious going on here, nothing dangerous going on here. And so we're going to stop your vessel, board it, inspect it, and then we'll let you go. And when we're satisfied that there's nothing there that we have to worry about.
Right, so it does seem like even though it's relatively stable right now, there are some things brewing just beneath the water. We'll have to see how that turns out. But in the meantime, thank you so much for your input and insight and being with us on Eastern Express.
Thank you for the invitation.
And now we're moving on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you don't want to miss. Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev said on February 14th that Russia deliberately targeted Azerbaijan's energy infrastructure and diplomatic missions during attacks on Ukraine. Speaking on the sideline of the Munich Security Conference, Aliyev said Azerbaijani facilities have been struck 3 separate times, including the country's embassy in Kyiv.
After attacks targeted Azerbaijani infrastructure in Ukraine in July 2025, Baku provided Moscow with the coordinates of its diplomatic sites. Despite this, Azerbaijan reported that an additional strike hit their embassy in Kyiv last year. In November 2025, the Azerbaijani embassy in Kyiv was again damaged as a result of Russian strikes. Aliyev told the Ukrainian newspaper Ukrainska Pravda that the strikes were a deliberate attack on a diplomatic mission of Azerbaijan. The reported attacks occurred amid Moscow's broader campaign against Ukraine's energy infrastructure, which intensified in late 2025.
Russia's state statistics agency, Rosstat, has stopped publishing data on the salaries and headcount of federal and municipal officials. And this comes as yet another push to limit public access to information about the public sector, according to independent researchers.
Beyond salaries and headcounts, Rostad also reportedly removed data on the share of women among municipal employees, previously used to measure progress towards UN Sustainable Development Goals. In addition, salary data for workers in healthcare, education, academia, culture, and social services are no longer publicly available. Statistics for the third quarter of 2024 were expected to be published in November, but were replaced with a notice of temporary suspension. Rostad has not published annual salary data for civilian government employees since 2022.
Russia has launched a broad political and economic pushback following a nuclear cooperation agreement between the United States and Armenia. The agreement was signed during Vice President J.D. Vance's visit to Yerevan on February 9th, with analysts pointing to growing U.S. influence in the South Caucasus.
Although Armenia has not formally selected a contractor to replace its aging Metsamor nuclear plant, officials have indicated that the next facility would likely use modular reactor technology, an area where the U.S. is seen as a leading developer. The deal is widely viewed as part of Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan's broader effort to reduce Russian economic influence. The Kremlin responded with sharp public criticism and new economic incentives. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov questioned the reliability and cost of U.S. nuclear technology. Moscow has also offered preferential financing for a Russian-built plant and proposed expanded cooperation, including agricultural support and railway restoration projects.
And that's all on this episode of Eastern Express. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.